Well, happy Monday, Evangel Church. I hope that your week has begun well. I want to start off by reading the text from yesterday's message, dealing with extravagant worship. And the three words that I mentioned yesterday that I want you to keep in mind are gratitude, love, and worship, and how they relate to each other. So in Luke chapter 7, starting in verse 36, it reads like this. Now one of the Pharisees was requesting him to dine with him, and he entered the Pharisee's house and reclined at his table. And there was a woman in the city who was a sinner. And when she learned that he was reclining at the table in the Pharisee's house, she brought an alabaster vial of perfume. And standing behind him at his feet, weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears, and kept wiping them with the hair of her head and kissing his feet and anointing them with the perfume. Now when the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would have known who and what sort of person this woman is who is touching him, that she is a sinner. Well, our worship says a lot about what's going on inside. It's the outward expression of an inward reality and really our view of Christ. And if you summed up the message, and by the way, if you weren't able to see it or be here yesterday, I'd encourage you to go back and watch it. But essentially this, one who's been forgiven much loves much. Okay? And the outworking of that love is an extravagant worship. So gratitude, love, and worship, they all flow together. And when we are captured by the cross, when we have a good, clear view of Calvary love, then we respond to others out of that love. So what I would say is that our church is desperate for extravagant worship. And if our church will worship Jesus extravagantly because we're aware that we've been forgiven much, then that will flow to our relationships with one another. Our relationships have been strained in this season, very divergent views, and we've allowed those divergent views to create distance in space. We either have become silent or we have just walked with a broken fellowship, and we demand the other to make it right. Well, what happens when we are captured with the cross, we really we don't demand much, because we're overwhelmed with the grace that's been shown us, because we're all in need. Following this section I just read, in verses 40 through really 50, Jesus gives this picture of two debtors. They both were in debt, and neither could pay those debts. And he asks the Pharisee, who will love the man more? And his answer is the one who's been forgiven more. And so Jesus makes this point that the sinful woman expressed great love because she's aware of what she's been forgiven of. And because of that, it testifies to her faith. It testifies to the reality of what she has received and who she is. And so the same is true of us. What we say and how we respond to others, how we react to Jesus, how we worship him, says more about what's going on in our lives than others. It's not because others deserve our love. It's because the Lamb that was slain does. And so I'm asking the Lord would just work in my life to give me an extravagant worship so that I can love others as he would have me to. And I would encourage you to do the same. Well, this week, pray that God would just overwhelm you with his presence. Go back and read through this section. Again, Luke chapter 7, verses 36 through 50. And ask him to speak to you about your worship. It's not others, it's us. It's dealing with Jesus personally. And so I would encourage you, join me in that prayer that he would make us extravagant worshipers. Well, I pray that you'd have a wonderful week, that you walk in the presence of Christ, and that you love passionately as you worship extravagantly. Love you, miss you. We'll see you real soon.